Welcome to Colorado, 47. The militia has taken up HQ at an old apricot farm and appear to be training for a series of coordinated strikes, ranging from cyber attacks to full-blown guerrilla warfare. The Shadow Client appears to unite specialists and radicals from all over the map. Mercenaries and terrorists, hackers and spies joined by an unknown common cause. Satellite scans indicate that the command room is below ground inside an old tornado shelter. Only Rose appears to have access, however, so to get inside, you will need to get creative. This environment is hostile and highly alert, so tread carefully. Good luck, 47.
Freedom Fighters was released on September 27, 2016. It is set in Colorado in the United States. Alright, buckle up, we've gotten to the level of Hitman people don't like. Let's do this. Common wisdom among fans is that Colorado is the worst level in the World of Assassination trilogy. But is this an unfair reputation? Do people hate this mission for no reason? Is Colorado secretly a brilliantly designed level unjustly maligned? No. Popular opinion got it right this time. Colorado is the worst level in the series. I'm not even going to beat around the bush and wait until the conclusion to say so. Colorado was the World of Assassination trilogy's biggest misstep, and it came by its reputation as the worst level in the three games, honestly. That's not to say it's not worth talking about, though. In fact, Colorado is made all the more interesting to examine because of all the ways in which it bungles the things that make these games so great. And what's more, even though it's the worst level in the World of Assassination trilogy, it's not a joyless experience to play. There's some tremendous fun to be had in the level, and it's very, very much worth your time. I guess my thesis for this video then is, yeah, it's bad, but it's not that bad. Freedom Fighters mission briefing opens with a lead on the Shadow Client. The anonymous tips that were being given in order to open legitimate contracts on the Shadow Client's targets have left a digital trail pointing to a woman named Olivia Hall. The trail has led to a farm in Colorado, which surveillance has revealed is a training camp for a private militia led by Sean Rose, a terrorist already wanted for a series of bombings. Also spotted on the farm are Ezra Berg, a former Mossad agent and interrogation/torture specialist, Penelope Graves, an Interpol anti-terror specialist and seeming odd man out among the group, and Maya Parvati, a former assassin and gunrunner. This contract has no client. Rather, this time you'll be working for the ICA itself, as Eric Soders, who you'll remember from the opening cutscene of the game way back in the tutorial, has urged the ICA board to strike this militia's leadership hard and fast, arguing they pose a direct threat to the ICA. Diana tells 47 that, honestly, she views this contract as hasty and poorly planned. She realizes that they can't go against the ICA, but wants to find more information about the militia and the Shadow Client, and so tells 47 that they'll be doing some investigation of their own during the mission. This gives the level a whopping 5 objectives, 4 targets to take down, and a non-target based objective to search for clues, to be done once the targets are all dead. This might not seem like a problem immediately, surely more targets only means more fun assassinations, right? Well, in reality, this is probably the biggest misstep of the level. The only target who ends up feeling developed to the degree we've come to expect from the game is Sean Rose, and even he feels firmly on the forgettable side of things. The other 3 targets, Berg, Graves, and Parvati, feel as if the resources for one target got split between the 3 of them. Take, for example, the mission stories. In typical levels so far, each target has had 2 to 3 mission stories providing ways of taking them out, with a couple others related to some other objective like getting into a restricted area. There are in fact 3 mission stories providing ways of taking Rose out. The other 3 targets, however, have 1 mission story each, and there are no mission stories other than these 6. That's theoretically fine. I've said before that mission stories are only one small part of this game, and a level like Marrakesh showed that the most fun to be had in these levels is often sneaking around and trying to find your own ways of doing things. I still think that's the case here. The most fun I've had with this level has always been sneaking around and finding fun ways of rigging the sandbox to take the targets out. However, the 3 targets other than Rose still feel underdeveloped. Their patrol routes aren't full of the same wealth of opportunities, their personalities, Berg accepted, are really rather mute, and it's hard to get invested in the personal stories of any of them. On top of all of that, once you've taken all of the targets out, you have to 3D print a mask in the upper level of the farmhouse, and then take it into the basement in order to finish investigating and complete the level. I was pretty negative about destroying the virus in Sapienza. This is worse. This is much, much worse. This has really got to be the worst of these non-assassination based objectives they've ever done, partly because the level already feels overcrowded, but also because this always comes down to going to the top of the farmhouse, distracting the hackers there, 3D printing the mask of Rose's face, and then heading to the basement. There is a secret second way of doing this that I'll talk about a little later, which is very, very cool, but it's much less practical. So aside from doing it once to see it, most of your runs through this level are going to end the exact same way, which, for a game which emphasizes a breadth of approaches as heavily as Hitman does, is wildly disappointing. It also means that in order to use the exits in the mission other than the standard tornado shelter tunnel, you need to be in escalation or contracts mode, rather than the actual mission itself, at least in the first game. Limiting the map to a single exit was an extremely bad idea. That was a lot of negativity compared to the normally glowing things I have to say about these levels, but this all adds up to a level that just doesn't live up to the extremely high standards of the rest of the trilogy, even though I do think there's a ton of joy to be had in this level. It's a case of the brightest lights casting darker shadows. By the standards set by typical video games, this level is still very good. The worst level of Hitman is the best level of most other stealth games. That reputation as the worst level in the series is well deserved, however, and to me, these are the main reasons why. I also think it's very clear that IOI learned a lot of valuable lessons from this level. The series would never do a level with this many targets again, with the sole exception of the mission Apex Predator, set in Berlin in Hitman 3, which has a whopping 10 targets. But Apex Predator is a very weird, very different type of level, and we'll discuss it, and the ways it's extremely successful, much later in this series. After this mission, the levels cap out at either 3 targets, with levels like Three-Headed Serpent or The Last Resort, or 2 targets and a non-assassination based objective, with levels like Another Life or Chasing a Ghost. It doesn't make Colorado better, but it's at least good to see that they never repeat this mistake, and it makes the problems with the level a lot easier to forgive, at least in my opinion. Freedom Fighters is, as previously mentioned, set on an apricot farm in Colorado, which has been taken over by a militia being led by Sean Rose, and converted into a military encampment. Before we get into the specifics of the map itself, I want to point out that this is the map that has been most improved by being ported into later games in the series, specifically from Hitman 1 to Hitman 2. First of all, the level looks dramatically better in later releases of the game. The original version of the map was going for a late dusk, like the sun is just about to go down over the farm, which is a great idea not unlike the setting of the Paris fashion show, but it's so dark and generally dimly lit that it honestly just makes me sleepy. The later versions of the map still keep that setting in mind, but brighten it up significantly, which is genuinely helpful to the gameplay, since it makes it far easier to simply tell what's going on in the level. Much more important than this, though, was the introduction of a new foliage system between Hitman and Hitman 2. This was a major feature of the second game, tall grass that 47 can hide in, like a Pikachu, ready to jump out and thundershock whatever target walks past him. This foliage system was ported back into the maps of the first game, with the levels being redesigned with new foliage added. It's a great addition to every map it appears in, and it's probably the biggest reason to recommend playing the Hitman 1 maps in Hitman 2 or 3 instead of actually playing the first game. But in Colorado, it makes the biggest difference so far, as the level is the only one to be primarily set outdoors. Being set on a farm, the foliage not only feels like a natural addition, but has been added to very smart locations where easier paths to sneak from one point to another were needed, and it legitimately makes the map far better than it was in its original release. In addition to this, the Hitman 2 and Hitman 3 versions of the map made infiltrating the tornado shelter using the mask of Sean Rose's face into an optional objective, which can effectively be skipped on subsequent playthroughs. That's excellent, and fixes one of the biggest issues with the mission. This also means that the other exits in the level are finally accessible. Because of the more dramatic differences between this map's original and ported versions, I made sure to spend some time revisiting the level in the first game, and some of that footage will appear throughout this video. It is the improved version of the level that I will be primarily looking at, however, as it is not only the version that I would recommend new players try, but it's also the version of the map that most players joining the series now will come across naturally. This improved version of the level has rightfully usurped the original release, and it's the one I'm interested in talking about. Of all the missions we've talked about so far, the one that Freedom Fighters most resembles is the final test. Both missions are set solely on a heavily guarded military installation, with no public spaces whatsoever. From the second you start the mission, you are trespassing. Not even trespassing, but technically in a hostile area. Shoot on sight. There's nowhere in this level you're going to be able to hang out in 47 standard suits, and the first challenge you'll actually face in the level is figuring out how to get a disguise that lets you into the base in the first place. This loses a lot of the charm of the other levels. The disguises in this level, with the notable exception of the game's High Suspicion challenge costume, are generally just different types of militia members. This is not only a bit dull on an aesthetic level compared to the previous missions, without the variety of things like waiters versus security guards versus lab technicians, but it also ends up being a real problem of causing confusion of who is allowed where. Even now, having played this mission dozens of times over the course of the past 5 years, I'll be walking around as a militia technician and get in trouble for walking somewhere that only the explosives specialist was allowed. Or I'll be a militia soldier and get yelled at for walking too close to the farmhouse, where only militia elite or hackers are allowed. This has been a problem before, for example soldiers versus elite soldiers having different permissions in the Marrakesh level, with only elite soldiers being allowed in the school. But here it feels like the whole level is built to make that problem as confusing as possible. It's a small map as well, with much less actual area to traverse, as well as being generally less dense. It's a wider footprint than something like the Bangkok map, but it's pretty much all sprawl, without the verticality of the other smaller maps like Paris or Bangkok. The entirety of the farm is surrounded by 2 levels of fencing, creating a thin circular path around the perimeter of the map. This perimeter is guarded by soldiers scattered about, along with 2 soldiers who are slowly patrolling the entire path. The path itself is filled with farm equipment and general junk that's been moved outside of the camp. For example, you can find a hay baler, which can be used similar to the mulcher in the Sapienza level as a single-person body dump, or used again to shred the occupant. The inner fence leading into the base camp has numerous locked gates, which can easily be bypassed with a lockpick, along with a few places where the fence can be vaulted over, or windows which can be climbed through. Getting an initial disguise can be tricky, especially on your first time through the level. The only immediately apparent option is going to be finding a way to lure a soldier away from his friends, take him out, and hide his body. The initial soldier disguise available, though, isn't putting you in a great position to start exploring the level, as there are frequent enforcers for it, both throughout the path surrounding the farm, and in the farm itself. Once you're past the fencing, the farm consists of a few different areas, which I'll be looking at as sort of 4 quadrants of the level. In the southeast corner of the farm is the junkyard and demolition range. The junkyard is mostly empty, really existing mostly as a place to get your initial disguise, with easy initial access to the farm, and a few soldiers scattered about, along with your first agency pickup location. The demolition range mostly exists for the purposes of one of the mission stories we'll talk about a little later, and is where the explosive specialists are set up testing the potency of different explosives, specifically on a safe you can find at one end of the range. I like this little dollhouse you can find still set up on a hay bale to one side of the explosives range. It gives the impression that kids would come and play in this area when the apricot farm was still functional. In the southwest corner of the farm, you find the orchards, along with the barracks being used for the soldiers, and an outdoor kitchen where soldiers are preparing food and eating. In the northwest corner of the orchard, you can find a communications station that's been set up. This station is where you can find the key to the perimeter gate, useful if you enter the level without a lockpick. Also in this orchard is the greenhouse, and above the barracks, you can find the water tower, the highest point of the level, providing the best sniper's nest available. Throughout the level, but primarily in the orchard, you can find apricots in boxes or which have fallen to the ground. These apricots can be used as distractions, essentially single-use coins, which can be thrown to draw someone's attention, but which are destroyed upon hitting the ground. The northeast section of the map is the most densely populated, containing the garage, a series of buildings where cars and vans are being worked on for upcoming missions, a shooting range set up for soldiers' target practice, and the barn, where Parvati's team are actively set up to practice for an upcoming motorcade raid, more on that later. Behind the garage is the slurry pit, where you keep slurry. Also, as 2 guards will mention if you eavesdrop on them, dead bodies.
Let's hope we don't get any more nosy neighbours this week.
Yeah, I hear you. But this is what we got, and it's a pretty good solution. We dump the bodies and they disappear. If the the cops or army or whatever storm this place, the dogs won't be able to sniff them out from their own assholes.
We just gotta make sure they stay home. Right? One more of those buses from Colorado Cannabis Store stopping by. We got a big problem on our hands. I mean, huge.
They recorded, a lot of dialogue between these two guards talking about dumping dead bodies in the slurry pit.
This is not the most optimal solution. But let's stick with it for now. Don't get more stone trespassers.
I don't know if I agree. We don't want too much attention. I mean, not like we do this constantly. I'm sure there's an easier solution.
Okay, how about we get some pigs to take care of the problem? They're fast, efficient, and they're kind of cute too.
A lot of dialogue.
I don't think we have any other options right now. In Slovakia, we build a big fire, remember? But that would only attract more attention around here.
Yeah, I get your point, but...
Yeah. But what I don't like is when I float to the surface. Maybe we should consider another way of dealing with the problem.
More than you'd expect, more than was at all necessary.
Yeah, but this is a bottomless pit. It's like a magic pocket for dead people. In 1,000 years, they'll discover the bodies and wonder what happened.
It seems like only part of it plays every time you load the game, but there's way more of it than you'd think. The roof of the garage and the attic of the barn are also accessible. In the northwest corner of the map, you'll find the farmhouse and Berg's lab. Berg's makeshift lab is in what used to be a shed. Berg's lab has 2 soldiers stationed at it, one inside working as a lab assistant to Berg, and one outside. The 2 can primarily be found chatting when Berg is not actively in his lab. The farmhouse is the most heavily guarded area of the map, with the only disguises being allowed access to the area being militia elite or hacker. The outside of the farm is surrounded with soldiers guarding it or training, and furniture that's been moved outside of the house and deposited on the lawn. A drill instructor is having 3 soldiers behind the building do sets of push-ups. Out back, you can find this nice little outdoor bar and grill, where some soldiers will occasionally come relax. You can find out how the militia acquired the farm here if you eavesdrop on a soldier standing at a grave nearby. It used to be his family's farm, and he's ranting about how they've disrespected and destroyed the place since taking it over.
And look at this place now, crawling with all these outsiders. It just feels fucked up.
True. They could have handled the situation better.
And my mom's grave. I mean, you can't even tell where the fucking place is anymore because they ran those big fucking Humvees over it. I mean, you kind of worry if these people are even real Christians, right?
Well, I wouldn't doubt their commitment, if that's what you mean. Let's just talk later, okay?
The farmhouse basement is accessible either from within the farmhouse or from a second entrance on the side of the house, and is where the militia is keeping a prisoner who's being interrogated by Berg. The farmhouse itself has 2 floors. On the lower floor, you can find a central room with a staircase leading up. To the right as you enter, you can find another barracks, this time for the militia elite, along with the kitchen, a pantry, and a bathroom. On the other side of the house, you can find a room that has been converted into a server room, along with a security room set up with computer equipment where the hackers are doing their work. Finally, a room where the militia's next operation, a raid on a motorcade in Mexico, is being planned. Upstairs, you enter into a hall connecting 2 rooms, which have had their walls torn out to turn them into one free workspace for the hackers, including the 3D printer used for the final section of the level, a children's bedroom being used as another sleeping and living space, labeled as the playroom, a sort of patio outside overlooking the farm, and finally Sean Rose's room, the master bedroom of the farmhouse, along with its connected master bathroom. I love how you can see little details everywhere in the farmhouse, showing thought for how the militia has converted it. For example, taking most of the doors in the building off their hinges, and knocking out some walls to make more open spaces. You can even see where they've draped rugs over the places where they've knocked out walls to make them easier to walk on. You can see how they've piled furniture to the sides of the room, or simply thrown it outside on the lawn to make room for the hardware they need. Downstairs in the server room, you can see a blood stain in one corner, which must be evidence of some sort of dark activity. Maybe this was previously where they kept prisoners. In the elite militia barracks on the lower floor, you can find a game of cards still set up where the soldiers had been playing during their downtime. All of these details are fantastic. That sums up the map of Colorado. So next, let's spend some time looking at the targets one by one. Penelope Graves patrols from the farmhouse down through the orchard and back. A former Interpol agent who's specifically spent years tracking Rose's movements. She's very much the odd man out among the group. Rose is understandably skeptical of her inclusion, and has ordered an armed escort with her at all times, which complicates your assassination attempt. However, she spends much of her time trying to get away from this armed escort, and digging around for more information about Rose, which can work to your benefit. Some of the responses she gets are worth listening to.
I just had a weird encounter with Sean Rose. He seemed kind of, I don't know, intense.
Apart from the compulsiveness, he's alright. Pretty demanding, if you ask me, but nothing I haven't experienced before.
Okay. Anything else you can share? Anything I need to look out for?
It's hard not to respect the skill. I wouldn't look to him for leadership, but as a bomb builder, he's second to none as far as I'm concerned. I think we all share that feeling.
Hi, I'm Penelope Graves. You look like you've been part of the crew for a while. Just, wondering how you're finding it here. Sean Rose okay to work with?
Rose? I don't know. I'm not sure if I fully trust a man that engages in that amount of personal hygiene. I mean, I'm down with not smelling as much as the next guy, but it seems like he's really into washing his hands. Was he trying to get out?
Uh-huh. Is that the general feeling among the men in the camp?
There have been some words exchanged over the Auckland incident. Nobody likes dead kids. But that was a long time ago.
She's using the greenhouse in the orchard as a sort of makeshift office, taking phone calls and keeping her private journal there. Maya Parvati keeps to the barn and garage area, with the smallest patrol route of any of the targets. A former assassin turned pirate, now turned terrorist, she's working with her men in the barn to practice the upcoming mission, a raid on a motorcade, and will patrol to the garage to see how work is coming along on vehicles necessary for the operation. Something interesting about Parvati is that she's missing an arm and has a prosthetic instead. The prosthetic isn't some sci-fi super tech or anything. It looks authentically like the kind of prosthetic you see people using in real life. If you listen to soldiers in the area, you can learn how Parvati lost the arm, as one of the soldiers stationed there fought her on the other side of a raid on an oil platform, and threw the grenade which took her arm from her.
See, ravaged the South China Sea with that maelstrom pirate boss who hijacked a TI-class supertanker.
Is that where she lost the arm?
Crazy shit. Can you believe she lost that to a grenade fired by one of the guys here? Happened before the boss gathered us all up. Some raid on a Hampson oil freighter. Crazy shit.
That's an awkward reunion right there, man.
The Maelstrom, referenced here as Parvati's former boss, incidentally, is a future target of the Mumbai map of Hitman 2. What's cool about this is the game doesn't draw attention to it, unless you get close and are paying attention to her actual character model, or hear some of the dialogue mentioning it. It's easy to forget, or even not notice, that this is an aspect of her character at all. She's not treated as less capable than any other NPC in the level. Rather, the game paints her as the biggest badass in the mission, largely because of the way she seems to be thriving, despite a life-altering injury. I like the portrayal.
Of course, you don't hold a candle to Maya Parvati, the training director.
Yeah, I was wondering about her. Indian?
Sri Lankan. Get this. She used to be an assassin and gun runner for the Tamil Tigers. Her father was one of their leaders. Then, when the Tigers disbanded in '09, Parvati took work as a freelance pirate in the South China Sea. For, guess who? None other than the Maelstrom.
Ah, colorful.
Yeah. And then, a grenade took her arm. That was the end of it. Happened during an attack on a Hampson oil freighter.
How do you know that?
I worked security on that freighter. I fired the shell.
Did what? Jesus. Does she know?
Uh-huh. When I first got here, Parvati walked right up to me. You know what she said? Good shot.
Right. Well, that settles it. I'm in love.
Unfortunately, that's about it for her characterization. She has the smallest patrol route, and generally the least interesting dialogue of the targets, feeling like the most undercooked personality of all of them. It would have been nice to see more opportunities related to her, and a more interesting story for her in the level itself, as her dialogue is mostly just shouting at her men to pick it up and do better in training.
Hello, sir.
That is some of the worst shooting I've seen in all my life. You might want to check that firearm, soldier. If you bring faulty equipment to the tourist mission, I'll skin you alive.
Ezra Berg is the most eccentric character in the level. A former Mossad agent, he can be found in the level wearing a Michael Myers-styled rubber mask, which was what the 3D printer in the level was actually used for. And you can hear soldiers in the level ask what's going on with that situation.
Freak in the mask? What the hell are you talking about?
I was just at the security station watching the feeds. There's this creepy guy interrogating the hostage. He wears like a 3D printed mask.
Oh, yeah, that must be Berg. Oh, yeah, man, his interrogation techniques, totally just out-of-the-box stuff. Like truth serums, drugs, that kind of thing. But none of the rough stuff. No, they don't like to mark up their patients, so to speak. Those Mossad boys like things clean and efficient. Berg. Ezra Berg?
Yeah. Yeah, man, I've heard of him. Chemical interrogation expert. I guess it's his makeshift lab they've set up. Word is he can make anyone cry.
Oh, man, you don't know the half of it. I mean, the stuff this guy's into, get this. Drug-induced hypnosis, memory wipes, subliminal mind control. Shit's like witchcraft.
Glad I'm not the prisoner. Christ, this next-gen warfare makes my head swim. You know, just point me in a direction and tell me who to shoot, eh?
Oh, no. You'll get to shoot. Don't worry, there'll be plenty of that.
Well, whatever Berg's up to, we better work fast. Rose is itching for some Q&A.
You can hear two soldiers stationed closer to the farmhouse discussing Berg as well, and how when actually spoken to, he's soft-spoken, eloquent, and seems like just a really nice guy.
The amount of freaks being brought into this camp has increased recently. Rose is on his own planet. But that new interrogation guy with the mask, what, Berg was it? What the hell's going on?
You know what? I talked to him earlier over a smoke. He's a really nice guy. Really eloquent, soft-spoken. Used to work with Mossad as a chemical interrogation expert.
Yeah, super creepy, more like. Why the mask? Horrific scars? What?
Well, that's for show, isn't it? Told me Mossad kicked him out because he'd started adding hypnosis and mind control to his bag of tricks. Apparently it all got a bit too much for them with the mask. Just there to support the terror he likes to instill in his subjects. It's all rather fascinating, really.
Almost blew his head off the first time I ran into him. Came out of that lab of his, you know, with that mask. I thought I'd come face to face with some backwater murderous cannibal type.
Yeah, guess it means the mask is working. Anyway, I'm happy he's on our side. Oh, I'd hate to be strapped to a chair, drugged to hell, and having to look at that mask while answering questions.
Hell yeah, that would suck out loud.
Ezra Berg is essentially the Scarecrow from the Batman mythos, complete with the scary mask to heighten his victim's fear. If you're not the victim he's drugging with mind control and fear toxins, though, he seems like a warm, jovial guy. He patrols between his makeshift lab and the basement, where he is interrogating the malicious prisoner, stopping for smoke breaks on the front lawn of the farmhouse. This just leaves Sean Rose. Sean Rose has the largest patrol route in the level, patrolling from the farmhouse to the barn and garage to the explosives range and back. Rose is the head of operations for the militia, and technically the leader of the militia of those currently stationed there, although generally disliked by the population of the camp.
Rose? Nasty little prick, if you ask me. Sure, it's not his fault that he grew up in that crazy collective farm out in the outback. What were they called? Sons of Solidarity? No, they're a bunch of left-wing cultists. But still, some of that stuff he's done makes my skin crawl. The oil rig, I get, but that government office in Auckland? Man, kids died.
Boss seems to trust him.
Yeah, of course he does. Rose is the perfect acolyte. I mean, he's smart, he's ruthless. But like all fanatics, he's impressionable.
Yeah, he's an idealist, that's for sure.
No, I've met his kind before. Rose yearns for a cause, sure, but any cause will do. Because deep down, the only thing he's really looking for is justification to blow people up.
Yeah, well, guess this time he found one.
Don't get me wrong, Sean Rose was born for this. The enemy doesn't expect it. Their cruelty, it's too remote. You know, you sign a document, thousands of people die half a world away. It's unreal, like drone operators. But Rose and the boss, The enemy doesn't know how to react. Savagery. That's how we'll win.
Yeah, bring a gun to a knife fight, huh?
More like bring an axe to a chess game.
Sean Rose is a terrorist who has been wanted for numerous bombings in Australia and New Zealand, which have killed both the targets and innocents, including children. He's a man who lives by the belief that the ends justify the means. The most notable piece of characterization about Sean Rose is that he has severe obsessive-compulsive disorder. This characterization is fairly divisive, so I need to be crystal clear here. If you are someone who suffers from OCD or some other similar anxiety disorder, and you find the portrayal of Sean Rose offensive or in bad taste, I don't want to tell you what to feel. I can't tell you what to feel, and I wouldn't if I could. If you're someone who doesn't suffer from OCD, but still finds the portrayal in bad taste, hey, that's great too. All I can do is give my own perspective on this, and understand that I am coming to this as someone who suffers from pretty severe OCD myself. This is an extremely personal subject for me, and I've always liked the way Sean Rose is portrayed. Sean Rose is someone who keeps things clean and orderly. When you go into Rose's room on the upper floor of the farmhouse, it's the only place in the entire level that feels pristine. Clean and ordered, not cluttered or dirty like the rest of the level. When Rose patrols around the camp, you can hear him muttering to himself, counting 1, 2, 3 over and over again, a coping mechanism that helps him keep moving forward, block out distractions, and keep his mind from grabbing on to random intrusive thoughts.
You know why I like weapons?
2,
A weapon
3.
doesn't lie.
1,
Weapons are honest,
2, 3.
like a horse.
Well, let's
1,
not go over the
2,
top. It's just a gun.
3.
What I'm saying is that a
He has a list of specific triggers, little things he needs to keep in order, like the pencils on his desk being in an orderly line, the grandfather clock running on time, or, most importantly, the private bathroom he uses to wash his hands very regularly. When you trigger his OCD in the unclean mission story, he starts telling himself to think about simple things that comfort him. Perfect geometric shapes.
Yeah, that was close. Yeah. That was close. Okay. Okay, deep breaths. No, deep breaths. Deep breaths. Think about geometric shapes. Strong. Sturdy. Symmetrical.
Again, what they're clearly trying to get at here are coping mechanisms. All of this feels authentic to me, to my experience, and I kind of like seeing what feels like a fairly honest representation of this in a game I care about as much as I care about Hitman. That's meaningful to me. That's important to me. As far as things the Colorado level does, which are successes or failures, I've always put Rose firmly in the success category, personally. Once you've taken out all 4 targets, you'll be given one last part of the mission to execute, getting into a secret tunnel beneath the farmhouse to investigate the Shadow Client further. The secret tunnel is only accessible to Sean Rose, and is accessed by a facial scanner, and so in order to get into the tunnel, you must use the 3D printer to print a mask of Sean Rose's face, and then scan the mask in order to get into the tunnel. I'll be talking about what you discover in the tornado shelter at the end of the video, as part of the conclusion, since it's all story content that makes more sense to talk about there. As for the rest of this, there's really very little left to say. It's a chore you have to execute every time you want to complete the level. Using the 3D printer is a suspicious action, so you have to find a way to distract or eliminate the hackers in the room for long enough to print the mask, and then take it downstairs. It's just sort of tedious, and was a poor decision for an objective in the mission. Now, let's move on to the mission stories of the level, and other ways of taking these targets out. Sean Rose is a bomb maker, and is specifically in the middle of a plot involving an explosive concealed inside the battery for a particular brand of smartwatch. This just so happens to be the exact same smartwatch which Rose himself wears. The explosive works by sending an email to the smartwatch, which is coded to trigger the explosive in the battery. Sneaking into Rose's room allows you to grab the explosive battery, and the hackers in the upstairs room containing the 3D printer have left a smartphone on the table, which has the email needed to trigger the explosive. The only remaining trick, then, is how to get the battery into Rose's watch, since the watch is firmly around his wrist most of the time. However, if you're smart enough to realize that Rose periodically washes his hands throughout his route, for example, in the garage by the explosives range and in his private bathroom, and observe him when he does so, you'll see him take off the watch and set it on a desk or table, giving you time to swap the batteries. Once he's put the watch back on, you can send the email.
Email. Boom?
Sean Rose confirmed down. Nicely done, 47.
At the explosives range, Sean Rose's explosives technicians are working on building a bomb of precise enough strength to blow a safe, without damaging the contents inside. They haven't gotten the mixture of the explosive gel right yet, and Rose is having them add nitroglycerin in very slight amounts at a time in order to not overpower it, and then coming to check the mixture himself as they do. If you go to the munitions depot, you can lure the guard in front of the nitro away and then pick up a jar or 3 yourself. Go back and lure the technician mixing the gel away, and you can overpower the mixture yourself, so the next time Rose goes to check on their work...
Okay, everyone step back. Fire in the hole.
Let's go. Scan the area for any IEDs.
This is my least favorite of the mission stories in Colorado. It's not an especially interesting story or theme, and it sort of feels like they just did this same idea with overpowering the flamethrowers on the Icon. Parvati and her men are in the barn attempting to practice the upcoming mission, raiding the motorcade of Gustavo Torres, Mexico's Secretary of the Interior. They're having difficulties, though, since their point man, Burgess, was clipped by their mechanical battering ram.
So what's this I hear about a training accident?
That would be Burgess, the sharpshooter. He's point man in the Mexico operation.
Huh. Got clipped by a ram or something?
The team trains with a battering ram to simulate the attack on Secretary Torres' motorcade. I don't know, I guess old Burgess had his head up his ass.
9 out of 10 accidents happen in the home.
They do say that. Anyway, the guy was lucky. Sprained his ankle, that's all. He'll be back in a couple.
So does Rose still supervise the training?
Sure, why?
Well, if we ever want to get rid of Rose without the boss knowing, I guess Burgess just taught us how.
I like your thinking. Tell Parvati, eh, man? It'll make her day.
Burgess was lucky, only injuring his leg, but the ram is easily able to kill someone when the safety is turned off. If you go to the barracks in the orchard, you can find Burgess, who can easily be identified by his limp. Take him out and steal his clothes, and you can become the point man instead, first sitting through a briefing on the operation, and then taking part in the practice run. In order to successfully complete this part, you have to first headshot the driver, then all 3 passengers in the limo, then take a crowbar, pry the door open, steal some documents from the Torres dummy, and then hit a button to indicate extraction, all in under 30 seconds. Once you've successfully completed this, Parvati will begin speaking to the entire team, while standing directly in front of the battering ram, giving you plenty of time to disable the battering ram's safety, and then use it to take Parvati out.
Nicely done. Parvati won't know what hit her.
If you want to take 2 birds out with 1 battering ram, then you can wait to start this process until after Rose patrols over to the barn to speak with Parvati. If Rose sees the training begin, he'll stick around to watch, and then he'll also step in front of the ram to interrupt Parvati's speech, praising 47's skills and saying how he'd make a great assassin. Sean Rose doesn't trust Penelope Graves. The mission briefing makes a point about Graves being the odd man out among the group, an Interpol analyst whose job was once tracking Rose and attempting to bring him to justice, now joining the same militia group he's overseeing. 2 NPCs near the slurry pit can be heard discussing a test which Rose is planning to put Graves through, attempting to see where her loyalties really lie, and telling his men to kill her if she fails.
So this test that Rose has planned seems kind of cruel, doesn't it? I mean, I'm no softy or anything, but it feels excessive to me.
She's got it coming. And nobody can switch sides like Graves and just expect to be accepted. Tests are in order, man.
Yeah, sure, I get that. But playing on her past with Interpol like that? I don't know, man. But I just hope the technician knows how to act.
She used to be the enemy. I don't have any sympathy for that. I'm sure he'll be fine. He's got the badge, right?
Yeah, he showed it to me over by the tent. Rehearsed his lines, too. He's taking this pretty seriously. Should be in the clear. Hey. It'll be interesting to see if she takes the hook.
And not to mention how far she'll go. You think she'll order us to be removed?
If she does, I got a 45 cal with her initials on it.
I hear ya.
The militia technician chosen to give Graves this test can be found at the communications station in the orchard. Using a nearby garden hose, You can easily lure him away, knock him out, and steal the Interpol ID badge, which Rose gave him to try to fool Graves. Take the badge and speak to Graves, and Agent 47 will introduce himself as an agent of Interpol, asking her to meet him near the slurry pit.
Penelope Graves, we need to talk.
You're... what is this?
I'll explain everything at the slurry pit. It will be in your best interest to do as I say.
I understand.
Anyway, how does it smell now?
I'll see you there.
Once she does, Agent 47 will give Graves an offer to think over.
Miss Graves, you are being recruited back into Interpol as an insider.
What? Who are you anyway? How did you find me?
That is not important. Think about this carefully. You can provide us with valuable intel. If you cooperate, the agency will overlook your unfortunate transgression.
And what if I refuse, huh? If I scream and get the guards here?
I wouldn't do that if I were you. Might prove unhealthy. I'll give you a few moments to think about it.
Graves will dismiss her guards, needing a moment to think about the offer, which provides the perfect opportunity to push her into the slurry pit, killing her and hiding the body all in one fell swoop.
What? Oh!
Graves is down. Excellent work, 47.
If you don't kill Graves here, and listen to her as she thinks the offer over, you'll hear her trying to determine how Interpol found her, before ultimately making her choice, rejecting the offer, and realizing Agent 47 isn't a genuine Interpol agent.
Think, Graves. How did they get to you? Flight out of Lyon under assumed name. Passport provided through Delgado and that Vanisher guy. I mean, it looked clean. Changed clothes at JFK and again at Denver International. Charred the passport after leaving the hotel. Burner phone was dropped before I left the flight. It can't possibly be that. Diplomatic car out of Denver. Nothing unusual about the bus ride. Met up with Hall in the middle of nowhere. Burned everything. I saw her do it. There's no way. Hackers erased everything here day one. No money, no paper trails, no digital signatures. It's just not possible. It's not possible. I decline your offer. You know why? 2 reasons. 1, I am not a rat. I've peeked behind the curtain and I don't like what I'm seeing there, so I'm here to change things. And 2, I don't buy it. There's no way Interpol would have found me. Hall erased my digital fingerprint. There is nothing connecting me to this place. So what gives? What are you up to?
Well done, Miss Graves. You passed the test.
Test? This was a test? Who set you up to this? Rose?
Yes, miss.
I can't believe it. Actually, you know what? That does sound just like him. What a waste of time.
You can hear militia soldiers around the camp discussing Berg, such as 2 very near the starting area of the mission. You can hear 2 soldiers on the first floor of the farmhouse discussing the Herald being kept prisoner in the basement of the farmhouse.
Boss got one in Johannesburg, didn't he? Shot him dead in an underground car park. So why keep this one alive?
The interrogator, Ezra Berg, has a way with people. He's got more drugs than God out there in his makeshift lab. I'm willing to bet the dapper little shit knows more than he's leading on. Berg will make him talk.
Heralds. I have to admit, it's got a ring to it.
Listening to Berg interrogating the prisoner in the basement reveals some interesting information. We heard Zaydan talking about these heralds on the phone back in Marrakesh, and this one describes his role as a messenger. Berg then asks about his superior, the Constant, and about the identity of the Partners, the first time we've heard either term in the games.
We heralds are only messengers. I have nothing to offer that you don't already know.
So you keep saying. But what about your superior, the leader of the heralds, the one you call Constant? Surely he knows more than you, such as the identity of the partners.
It's possible. I never asked.
What does he look like?
like a bookkeeper. Like the guy you sit next to on the bus, plain as vanilla. That's the idea. You'll never find him, but he will find you. Give me another dose, Doctor. Break my mind. Won't do you any good.
We'll see.
Even Berg is having some trouble getting the prisoner to talk, pacing back and forth between his makeshift lab and the basement. You can find a key to the basement in his lab. Unfortunately, his lab is occupied by a militia soldier who is starstruck by Berg and wants to apprentice under him, and the man's friend who is hanging around talking with him. If you go to the basement, you can take out the lone guard there, and then up the prisoner's dosage, causing Berg to rush to the basement to check what's going wrong. The easiest way to take Berg out is to just kill him then and there, as he's in the basement alone. But the more fun way to do it is to go to Berg's lab and loosen the valve on a gas canister in the corner. Once Berg has checked on the prisoner, he'll go back to the lab to re-examine his notes, and start producing more of the chemicals being used to interrogate the prisoner. He'll banish the apprentice from his lab, and then turn on a Bunsen burner next to the gas canister, blowing himself up. You can hear two hackers on the second floor of the farmhouse discussing triggers for Sean Rose's OCD, along with the fact that he chain smokes to calm down when his OCD is triggered.
Had to go outside and chain smoke half a pack before he calmed down. Seriously, 1 pen.
Huh. Best one yet. Okay, so what do we have? Desk, offsetting the grandfather clock.
Turning off the faucet in his office?
Right. Oh man, we should write this down.
Yeah. Wait, that's probably not a good idea, though. You know, on account of him being a stone-cold terrorist and all.
Yeah, well, terrorists have a sense of humor too, don't they?
Rose's remains to be seen.
If you go to the greenhouse in the orchard, which Penelope Graves periodically visits, you can find her personal journal, containing notes on Rose, most notably that Rose is hypersensitive to hallucinogenic drugs. If you go to Berg's makeshift lab, you can find a vial of hallucinogenic drugs on one of the shelves, and then lace Rose's cigarettes with them. You can set Rose up for a major OCD episode. Once you've laced the cigarettes, you can go to the clock and move the hands, go to Rose's desk and move one of his pens out of place, and turn the water to his faucet off. As Rose patrols through the farmhouse, his OCD will be set off, causing him to go smoke. Once he does, he'll start panicking about the germs he's covered in, and, unable to wash his hands at the faucet he normally does, he'll run to a bucket of water in a small shed, where you can easily drown him.
No. No. What is that? Oh God, no, what the hell is happening now? What is happening? This is bad. Oh, jeez, I'm covered. I'm covered in all. Oh, God. They're everywhere. Oh, get them off. Get them off. Jeez, no, I'm clean. Unclean. I gotta get it off. Why won't they wash off?
Hey! Oh!
And then hide his body in a crate right outside the shed's window. That's it for mission stories, but there are some other notable ways of taking the targets out. Parvati's patrol route will lead her under a suspended bale of hay, which can, with proper timing, be dropped on Parvati, killing her, either by shooting the cable or by dropping it from the attic of the barn. The grandfather clock, which Sean Rose periodically checks to make sure it's running correctly, is directly under a large chandelier. You can easily drop the chandelier on Rose, killing him as he does this. Rose isn't the only one who checks the clock, though. Penelope Graves has spent years studying Rose, and will also check the clock, even commenting on how it keeps perfect time, and that Rose must fiddle with it every chance he gets. This lets you drop the chandelier on her as well. I like this dynamic, that Graves, whose life was dedicated to getting in Rose's head, is the only other person who pays the grandfather clock any mind.
Talk to me. What's going on? What a beautiful clock.
What's the problem?
Keeps perfect time, too. I bet Rose tinkers with it
Control
every
from
chance he
Mike 1.
gets.
We may have a potential... Red leader.
There's a car lift in the garage just next to Parvati's patrol route. If you clear out the area and then lure Parvati under it, you can crush her to death with it, earning the Crushed It challenge. As part of his patrol route, Berg will light up a cigarette in front of a lawnmower outside the farmhouse. If you tamper with this lawnmower and cause an oil leak, you can get Berg to light himself on fire when he stamps out the cigarette. Parvati's patrol route brings her right by a gas tank at the garage. You can loosen a pipe on the gas tank to cause a leak, then shoot it in order to burn Parvati to death. There are several challenges related to killing all 4 targets in the same way. One called Name Your Poison for killing all 4 targets with poison. One called String Quartet for killing all 4 targets with the fiber wire. One called The Perfect Alibi for killing all 4 targets in accidents. And one called Swamp Thing for dumping all 4 targets' bodies in the slurry pit. It's another fairly standard batch of mastery rewards this time, mostly weapons with suppressors like the RS-15 assault rifle at level 2, a fully automatic version of the ICA-19 pistol you start the game with at level 10, or the Seeker 300 sniper rifle at level 15. More interesting are the concealable baton at level 7, a non-lethal melee weapon which can be smuggled through frisk points, a block of powerful remote explosives at level 20, or, best of all, the disposable scrambler at level 10, a single-use item which can be used to pick keycard locks. My favorite part of any Hitman level is exploring it for details and Easter eggs, and this is one area in which Colorado definitely does not disappoint. First, I want to point out a funny and bizarre bug that exists in the game's Hitman 2 and 3 versions. Just outside of Berg's makeshift lab, you can see a small floating vial of sedative poison. It's been in the Hitman 2 version of the map since launch, it's still there in Hitman 3 as of writing, and it was not there in the first Hitman. Super weird, super funny. The title of the mission, Freedom Fighters, is a reference to another game IOI made previously, also titled Freedom Fighters. Another reference to IOI's previous games is that 2 NPCs in the house can be found playing Kane and Lynch, another game made by IOI prior to the Hitman reboot. There's also a poster of Kane and Lynch nearby. One of the strangest Easter eggs in the game is called Reptires. First, scour the level until you find at least 10 apricots. Then, go to Berg's makeshift lab and pick up the vial of hallucinogenic drugs. Go to the playroom where soldiers are playing Kane and Lynch, and you'll see that the toy dinosaur scooter sitting on a shelf now has a feed prompt. Feed the dinosaur toy all 10 apricots, and it will vanish in a puff of smoke. Next, complete the mission in whatever manner you choose, and at the end, take a detour to the shed in the orchard near the front of the level, where you can find the keys to the quad bike, unlocking that exit. When you approach the quad bike exit, just outside the fence from the garage, you'll see that it's been replaced with the dinosaur toy. If you use the exit now... Is it being called Reptires a reference to Reptar from the cartoon Rugrats, or is that too far? I'm not sure. If you kill Rose and drag his body into the basement where you can find the facial scanner, typically requiring 3D printing a mask of his face to get past, you can use his body to open the door instead. In the mission briefing, in the shot of Olivia Hall sitting at a desk, if you look at one of the screens to her left, you'll spot what looks to me like a reference to the famous you didn't say the magic word scene from Jurassic Park, with Olivia Hall's face replacing that of Dennis Nedry. You can hear several NPCs around the farm discussing the boss, referring to the Shadow Client, and how no one but Olivia Hall seems to know anything about him or his past. One pair in the North Orchard talk about how the only thing anyone knows is that he and Hall met in Sierra Leone in around 2002.
Rose put you on the Mexico team.
Reykjavik. Security for Olivia Hall on the Hampson oil operation.
She's the boss's protege, right?
She leads the cyber division. She's only 24, but apparently some kind of prodigy. She used to operate under the hacker name Del Rigo. Took down some major corporations while she was in college.
Where's she from, anyway?
Sierra Leone. She met the boss during the war. That's about all anyone knows about his past. That he was in Sierra Leone around 2002.
Better than nothing.
Save it. Already tried. There's no record of him anywhere.
I bet she knows. Someone should get her drunk. Maybe she gets chatty.
Bad idea, mate. Hall could empty your bank accounts from her smartphone. Those millennials have scary powers.
Another two discuss what his identity might be, and why he might have started the resistance movement against Providence, theorizing that he must have once been a member himself.
I suppose we're all thinking the same thing. He's one of them, right? How else could he know so much about the enemy?
Only thing that makes sense.
I mean, we've all felt the rage one time or another. The boss didn't start this out of charity. The hate runs deep.
We all have our reasons, mate. Don't need to know his.
Yeah? What's your reason?
I do what I'm paid to. Made my peace with that a long time ago. Still, pick the right side whenever I can afford to. Righteous money just rests lighter in your pocket.
I hear ya.
Two NPCs can be overheard discussing why Rose was put in charge of operations, as opposed to other members of the militia, as well as explaining what the actual purpose of Rose's smartwatch bomb is planned to be.
Sean Rose in charge of operations? I don't get it. Why'd the boss pick him? Why not Reynard?
The way I see it, Reynard's a lone wolf. Berg's too specialized. I mean, he's no strategist. Parvati is... well, Parvati's Parvati. I think Rose wants to lead, fiercely dedicated, completely ruthless. Did you ever hear his plan to take out Simon Devereaux, the CEO of Biosphere?
I know, he's building a bomb.
Right. So Devereaux he's like exactly like Thomas Cross. Totally impossible to get near. But also a tech geek. And he just ordered this new Link 4 smartwatch. So Rose, crazy bastard, gets the idea to turn the battery unit for a Link 4 into, get this, a bomb. And then swap the watches in delivery. One push of the button, bye-bye Devereaux.
Whew, that's pretty extreme. Enemy operative, I know, but it just seems so unsportsmanlike.
Yes, and there you have it, right on the nose. And again, that's why Rose is the head of operations. To him, the end justifies the means. And I mean, there is nothing that dead-eyed psychopath would not do.
They specifically name-drop Reynard, a reference to Alma Reynard, another member of the Resistance who shows up as the target of the Hawke's Bay map in Hitman 2. Two soldiers in the South Orchard can be heard discussing Graves and her history working with Interpol, specifically tracking Rose.
So, the boss hires his former Interpol agent to do strategic analysis for us. Yeah, it's pretty smooth. She can be trusted, of course.
Bit of a strange one. Not strange like Rose, mind you, but kind of aloof. I heard from the technicians that she's a Cambridge graduate, top of her class, things like that, you know. Joined Interpol a few years after.
Did you know that her main focus there was tracking Rose? I mean, how poetic is that?
Yeah. I don't know about poetry, but it sure is a twisted move by the boss.
Then again, she was supposed to be the best, and the boss only hires the best. I guess we'll see if she can handle things on this side of the fence.
If not, I'm sure Rose has some elaborate retirement plan ready for her.
Two soldiers in the North Orchard can be heard discussing what a strange ragtag crew it really is that has been assembled by the Shadow Client, and wondering how he hopes to keep them together.
So you got your ex-military, your mercenaries. I saw a couple of cicada guys arrive earlier. Then there's freedom fighters, intelligence specialists, cyber criminals, you name it. Half of these people probably fought each other at some point.
Oh man, that's not even counting the really freaky ones. Like left-wing terrorists like Sean Rose, corporate whatevers like Crest. Yeah, it's like the United Nations of assholes.
Yeah. And what the hell is an anarcho-primitivist?
You got me, and I don't want to know.
This is a powder keg. How does the boss even hope to unite these freaks?
The way he always does. Take them all, point them at a common foe.
That's simple, huh?
Well, I mean, armies are easy enough to deal with when the bullets are flying. It's all the shit that comes after that you gotta worry about. Peacetime, when soldiers get bored, start getting ideas. I mean, that's when shit gets dangerous.
Okay, Sun Tzu. Let's cross that bridge when we get to it, huh?
One thing I just generally love is looking at the fake brands in games, and if you go to the kitchen or pantry of the farmhouse, you're able to find some fun fake cereal brands like Honey Bear, Apple Bran Crunch, or my favorite, Captain Sugar Rush, featuring a deformed and terrifying version of Captain Crunch. I guess the militia does all their shopping at Omega Mart. The two guards outside the barn can be heard discussing the operation at Jordan Cross's funeral, and the kidnapping of Thomas Cross, along with discussions of the militia's upcoming operations, and another reference to Reynard.
Oh, you were at Jordan Cross's funeral, huh?
It was a thing of beauty. Whole team moving like clockwork. Perfect execution. Thomas Cross was off site before his guards even noticed.
Man, wish I could have been there. So who's this next target?
Gustavo Torres, Mexican Secretary of the Interior, and one of the enemy's top operatives in Latin America. Rose wants a classic motorcade attack, harsh, loud and fast. So we ram Torres' vehicle, then lay down suppressive fire while Burgess, the point man, takes out Torres and his entourage.
All right, sounds like a plan.
So what's your assignment?
Berlin, I think, with Reynard. That's all I know. Honestly, as long as I can get to hunt down one of those fat cat assholes, I don't even care.
Hear, hear.
In the attic of the barn, you can find a mannequin arm melee weapon, used for the Lending a Hand challenge to knock out 10 NPCs with it. When Graves is in the farmhouse, you can overhear her piecing together the events of the game so far, including why Cobb, the bank director, was killed, and why Novikov and Margolis were killed back in Paris.
It's actually quite brilliant in all its improvised glory. Cobb, the bank director whose plane crashed, the boss killed him for the vault key. But how did he know Cobb was even an enemy operative? Question for later. So, the spy ring. Infamous Iago. The boss somehow gets access to their dossier of secrets. And, well, this is how he learns about the enemy's projects in Italy and Morocco. But why kill the Iago leaders? Novikov and Margolis were unaffiliated. The Russian must have seen the boss's face. And the enemy has to have known about Iago. Probably even used their services from time to time. It was a precaution. Nothing more.
When Graves and Berg's paths first cross, you can hear them discuss Graves' impression of Rose, having finally met the man she spent years chasing. Berg can be heard mentioning that Reynard is bringing the camp another carton of cigarettes the next week, another reference to Alma Reynard.
Penelope, it's Berg.
Dr. Berg? I didn't recognize you in your work clothes.
No, that's the idea. So, I take it you finally met Rose. Way I hear it, you were on the Interpol's task force to hunt him down. So what's the verdict?
Sean is dedicated, creative, driven.
You don't have to sugarcoat it. The man's an extremist. You've seen the Shanghai plan. Kidnapping children, forcing an innocent man to commit murder. It's distasteful. Rose has no honor, no sense of fair play. The boss asked me here because he wanted to avoid unnecessary cruelty. So why does he tolerate Sean Rose?
Because the boss is not a monster. And right now, well, he needs one.
Sean Rose, freelance terrorist, because sometimes you need a monster. You ought to be in advertising. Anyway, I'm needed back in the room. I'll see you around, Penelope.
Say, how many packs do you have left? Them Rose keeps bumming mine.
Reynard's bringing a carton on Tuesday. If you run out, I've got some recreational hallucinogens in my garage lab. I'll be happy to conjure up a dose for you.
Yeah, that's probably a little strong for me. Thanks anyway, Doc.
Suit yourself.
One of the soldiers behind the farmhouse doing push-ups can be heard struggling to meet the demands of his drill sergeant.
But let's get serious. Time to make you a man. Drop and give me 100.
Doing the best I can.
One thing I haven't mentioned yet in this series is that what's playing on the radios used as a distraction when turned on changes from level to level. In this mission, you can hear it playing an assortment of radio ads, and they're all pretty hilarious. There's an ad for a new sleeping pill from the Ether Corporation, the same company you'll recall from the story of the Sapienza mission earlier in the game.
A good night's sleep. It's the thing we're all dreaming of during the day. And now, the Ether Corporation presents the Eye on Your Sleeping Pill. Layers after layers after layers of sleep. Pull it over yourself like a blanket. The Eye on Your Sleeping Pill. You never have to wake up again.
There's an ad for an upcoming wrestling match, including one wrestler named The Hitman.
This Saturday, the Hitman, champion of the world, versus the ever-evil Spec Ops #1. Who will win in the cage of death? Chairs, 2x4s, and broken glass allowed. No rules, no rules. This Saturday. Don't miss it. Please check with your cable provider.
There's an ad for used cars from a particularly desperate-sounding salesman.
So, come on down to old Stevie's used cars, because we got all the cars that are used that you would want to buy. And please come down and buy them, because you need to pay for it. You don't need to know that. Just know that Stevie will be down here and I'll be wearing my clogs. And selling used cars, so hurry on down, quick.
And my favorite, a radio trailer for an upcoming movie about dogs and cats and disease.
In a world where dogs and cats can actually live together, they're nice to each other. Dogs and cats. Poor Spike has a disease. A dog with a disease. He doesn't have much time left, so he goes on a heartwarming voyage across the nation to find his owner. And across the way comes across a cat, and they become best friends and work together for a heartwarming story about dogs and cats and disease.
This film is rated PG-13. Children under 13 should not be admitted, or with parents. Cool parents.
These ads have the same energy as the interdimensional cable episodes of Rick and Morty. One guard by the farmhouse can be heard sharing some fun science facts about the sun and the moon with his friend.
Did you see the moon last night? I'll tell you something you don't know, right? The moon and the sun, they're actually the same thing. Moon's on one side, the sun is on the other. No, they're really just a half each. We only see them one at a time. No, when you think you see the moon in the sky during the day, that's just a reflection from the other side of the world that's looking at the moon. Yeah, now you know. So you can stop looking so stupid, okay?
I enjoy these interesting streams of consciousness that come from you. I mean, it's crazy talk, but it's never boring crazy talk, that's for sure.
You can listen to the conversation between the two soldiers at Berg's lab, and one will mention that he's been training to breathe underwater and grow gills.
So I've started practicing breathing underwater. If I train hard enough, I've heard that I'll develop gills after a while. A couple of years, I should be able to easily breathe underwater. So, you gotta be dying to know. What's the secret, huh?
Are you serious? I honestly think you are in need of professional help. Right here, right now.
When one soldier at the barn asks Parvati about how they plan to escape from the upcoming mission, she name-drops the Delgado cartel as being on their side.
Parvati, I'm curious. What's their exfiltration plan?
Rosa's got it covered. Don't worry about it.
Do worry, sis. I'm not an idiot. Execution is one thing, escaping another. Gustavo Torres is not just some corporate suit. He's bloody Secretary of the Interior.
Well, it's a good thing we have the support of the locals.
What does that mean?
The Delgado cartel.
Delgados. We're in business with the worst crime cartel south of the border.
Politics makes strange bedfellows. Anyway, you should be relieved.
Yeah? Why is that?
Nobody's better at making people disappear than the Delgados.
This kid gets better and better.
The Delgado cartel's leadership will show up as targets in the Columbia level of Hitman 2, and members of the Delgado family were targets in Hitman Blood Money. The high suspicion outfit for this level is the Scarecrow. You can find the Scarecrow hanging from a post outside the communications post. Obviously, wearing the Scarecrow outfit is going to get you in trouble if you're spotted, especially since the entire level is hostile. To mitigate this, there are posts where you can stand and pretend to be a Scarecrow throughout the level in order to hide in plain sight. Standing at all 5 Scarecrow posts awards the hidden No Birds Here challenge. There are also several challenges related to getting kills while dressed as the Scarecrow, such as one to drop the hay bale on a target while disguised as the Scarecrow, or another to kill a target with the axe while disguised as the Scarecrow, be spotted, and escape to an unseen state once again without ever changing disguises. One of the soldiers guarding Rose's room will periodically take a nap in Rose's bed, which I can only imagine Rose would take really well if he found out. If you throw the jars of nitroglycerin, which you can pick up for one of the mission stories, they explode. There's another extremely hidden Easter egg involving bells here. This time, you must be in the Scarecrow outfit. While wearing the disguise, take a sniper rifle to the water tower and shoot 4 bells hidden far out of bounds in the level, in a particular order. Once you do, a sound effect will play, and the Wicker Man challenge will pop. Until you change disguises again, any NPC who gets close to you will burst into flames and be killed, letting you easily run around the map and killing absolutely everyone there.
On the staircase!
I like this Easter egg a lot. Running around and setting everyone in the map on fire is a ton of fun. Near the drill instructor behind the farmhouse, there is a radio. If you pick up an apricot and throw it at the drill instructor's head, and then turn that radio on, some cowboy-style music will start playing, and the soldiers taking part in the drills will begin dancing, awarding the Howdy Partner challenge. One soldier standing guard on top of the barracks can be heard telling his friend about a cryptid he keeps seeing off in the distance.
Whoa, there it is. That weird creature. What the hell is that?
Yeah. So what is it this time? Big
Seriously. This was something else. It had a tail. Walking 4 legs. Like a face. This may sound crazy, but it had human features.
Listen. Doesn't matter what kind of freak it is. Nothing's entering the compound without setting the alarm system off, okay?
The version of Colorado that was released in 2016 and the version that exists now in Hitman 2 and Hitman 3 are very different levels in some key ways. It speaks well of IOI's commitment to the game's continued life that they looked at the one level from the first game that needed some work and updated it while keeping the core intact well enough to bring it closer to in line with the rest of the series' quality. The Hitman 3 version looks a lot better, and not having to enter the tornado shelter every time you play, along with actually being able to use the other exits to the level outside of contracts and escalations, makes for a much stronger mission overall. Unfortunately, the core of this mission is never going to be on par with the best levels of the series, and it's sandwiched between my 2 favorite levels in the first game, which doesn't help it by contrast. Once you enter the tornado shelter, you take a moment to explore it, playing a series of cutscenes titled The Hidden Hand. It's filled wall to wall with a conspiracy theory board complete with red string held up by thumbtacks. Familiar faces line the wall, including Thomas Cross, Klaus Strandberg, and Silvio Caruso, along with several others. Soon, Agent 47 discovers the name tied to all of this, much to Diana's disbelief.
The plot thickens.
Someone left in a hurry.
Sean Rose was not the Shadow client. That much is clear. Whoever commands the militia, they got out just in time. Look around, 47. We're getting closer.
Some kind of network. Power players. From all sectors.
Familiar faces, too. Thomas Cross. Klaus Strandberg. Ether. And that's missing banker Eugene Cobb. Well.
There's a name. Providence.
What? No. No, it can't be.
The Hidden Hand. Thought they were a myth.
A hypothesis, nothing more. The idea that a small cabal of kingmakers, controlling enough corporate and political leaders, could effectively run the world in secret.
Maybe not so hypothetical.
Keep looking, 47. We need full disclosure.
The The Shadow Client also has a second pinboard tracking not Providence, but Agent 47, including kills from previous games.
Someone's done their homework.
Look how far it dates back. Hayamoto, Beldingford, Delvade. The Shadow Client has been tracking you for decades.
Now, how is that possible?
It isn't. Every one of those missions were branded as unsolved or accidents. He must have been looking for a pattern, a certain MO, which would mean...
He knows me.
Well, at least this shortens the list.
Most shockingly, it seems that Eric Soders is on the Shadow Client's list of Providence assets. It seems that the ICA itself has been compromised, which explains why Soders was so adamant that they hit the militia hard and fast in this hastily put together strike against them.
Found something.
Soders? But that would mean... Providence has infiltrated ICA, and Eric Soders is their operative. Bastard! It all fits. He was the one who persuaded the rest of the ICA board to greenlight this operation. This changes everything. Get out, 47. We got what we came for.
What about the Shadow Client?
He is no longer our primary concern. ICA has been compromised. I always wondered if Providence was real, but I never actually... I will need to confer with the board, but mark my words, 47. This will have consequences.
Diana is furious and tells 47 that she'll speak to the ICA board, and will make sure that Eric Soders pays for what he's done. After The Hidden Hand, a second cutscene titled Old Friends plays. This time one of the motion-captured ones we've gotten used to. The Shadow Client raises a sniper rifle while speaking to Olivia Hall on the phone many miles away.
Rose is gone.
It was me, wasn't it? They tracked me. I don't believe it. I took every precaution.
Rose knew the risks. They all do. You did well, Olivia. I am proud of you. Now listen. The ICA knows about you. They kept you alive because they needed you, and now they don't. We won't talk again. Not until the storm is over.
I don't like it. This man, you know what he's capable of. You need to end this now.
I ran away as a boy. My friend and I. Away from that place. We came upon a small farming community. The people were dirt poor, but this woman, she took us in. We were awakened the next morning by the shots. A dozen people lay face down in the snow. Our warden didn't like to leave witnesses. They shot the woman and her family last. They made sure that we watched the whole thing. This is your gift, the warden told us. Your gift and your curse. Touching lives only by ending them. Better than anyone.
The Shadow Client had 47 in his sights and let him go. As Diana and 47 put together in the tornado shelter, the Shadow Client knows 47. And as the Shadow Client sees Agent 47 in his scope, and Olivia tells him that they're better off with 47 dead, he only talks about escaping that place with his old friend as a boy. If that wasn't enough to clue you in as to what the Shadow Client's relationship to 47 is, then the title of the cutscene, Old Friends, should. The Shadow Client is someone 47 knew in another life. Someone from Agent 47's mysterious and forgotten past. 47 doesn't know who he was before the ICA, and the only lead that the ICA had came up totally scrubbed. The Shadow Client, be he friend or foe, might be the only chance 47 has at finding out who he was before the game opened in 1999, and the only clue to why his entire life up to that point is a blank. The Shadow Client lets 47 walk away. Next time, 47 and Diana will take their first steps against Providence, chasing Eric Soders to a hospital in Hokkaido.